working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to Asean in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. We're coming to you live from Manila and Indonesia. Hello, December.
Hello, Alma, and to all the televiewers. I'm December Paras of Indonesia Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines.
We, as ASEAN,
President Duterte emphasized the importance of defeating the COVID-19 pandemic in the ASEAN summit.
I urge
The United Kingdom and United States, as you know, recently announced an enhanced...
Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison sought understanding from ASEAN nations on the security pact known as AUKUS.
And I want to address this up front because transparency and communication on this important initiative is important to Australia with our ASEAN friends.
And the Department of Tourism on Thursday said 14 destinations across the country have scrapped their swab test requirement for fully vaccinated guests.
Thailand's biggest airport, Suvarnabhumi in Bangkok, rehearses reopening procedures to welcome back the first group of tourists on November 1 as the country reopens after a devastating shutdown.
First, we go to the virtual ASEAN summit. President Duterte emphasized on Tuesday the importance of defeating the COVID-19 pandemic. He also emphasized the need to ensure the phased and comprehensive implementation of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, which contains initiatives and strategies that will help the region recover from the crisis. Let's listen in.
we, as ASEAN community, must be able to stand on our own. Hence, I urge the Asian Secretariat to expedite vaccine procurement. We must also have our own regional vaccine research production facilities for us to be ready for the future public health emergencies. We must ensure the phased and comprehensive implementation of the broad strategies under the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework.
President Duterte urged fellow ASEAN leaders to stand with Myanmar after its military took control of the country in a coup earlier this year. In his speech at the 39th ASEAN Summit Plenary Hall held via video conference on October 26, Duterte expressed concern that Myanmar's crisis would worsen the impact of the prevailing COVID-19 pandemic. Watch this.
The lack of progress in Myanmar has put ASEAN's credibility into question. How we respond collectively will either affirm ASEAN's relevance or reveal our impotence. It is up to us to prove that ASEAN is not just talk shop. I am deeply concerned that the ongoing situation in Myanmar may further exacerbate the effects of the pandemic. While focusing on the comprehensive recovery efforts, we must stand with Myanmar in resolving the issues peacefully and in a manner that prioritizes the welfare of the people. The Philippines urges all parties in Myanmar to engage in constructive dialogue with ASEAN. We are, after all, an ASEAN family, And if one cannot trust each other and trust together, then who can Myanmar trust and work with? We stress that ASEAN Special Envoy must be able to visit Myanmar soon and meet all the parties involved. We need to listen to all sides so that we can effectively assist Myanmar in pursuing enduring peace and stability.
ASEAN leaders started the annual ASEAN summit without Myanmar after its military refused to send a representative to the three-day meeting in protest over the exclusion of its top general. On October 15, ASEAN agreed to bar Myanmar's army chief or military chief, Min Aung Hlaing, who toppled a civilian government over his failure to implement a peace plan he agreed with ASEAN in April towards ending the violent political crisis triggered by the coup. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison mentions his country's border reopening and also said he supported ASEAN's move to seek an end to Myanmar's crisis as he attends the online talks with Southeast Asian bloc in the first ASEAN-Australia summit. Take a look.
Rollouts. We've also approved Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Vaccine Janssen, COVID Shield and Sinovac as recognised vaccines for determining incoming travellers. And that particularly means that even before the end of the year, we expect to be welcoming back double vaccinated students from within the region. And I welcome today, particularly Prime Minister Lee, the announcement you've made about Australia's travel into Singapore, and we will soon be seeing similar travel back to Australia. We are concerned about the situation in Myanmar, which you've mentioned, particularly Prime Minister Lee. Australia strongly supports ASEAN's efforts to chart a course out of the crisis, and we call on the regime to cease violence against civilians, engage in dialogue and release all those arbitrarily detained, including Australian Professor Sean Turnell.
And Prime Minister Scott Morrison sought understanding from ASEAN nations on the security pact known as AUKUS. Under the alliance, christened with acronym AUKUS, Australia will be the only country other than Britain to have access to U.S. technology to build nuclear power and submarines which could deploy in contested waters where Beijing is assertively exerting its claims. Morrison attempted to allay concerns that the AUKUS security partnership of Australia, Britain, and the United States could spark a nuclear arms race in the region. Let's listen in.
The United Kingdom and United States, as you know, recently announced an enhanced capability and technology sharing partnership, which is known as AUKUS. All three of us are ASEAN dialogue partners. And I want to address this up front because transparency and communication on this important initiative is important to Australia with our ASEAN friends. AUKUS adds to our network of partnerships that support regional stability and security. Australia remains deeply committed to international law and the rules-based order that has underpinned regional stability and prosperity on which all ASEAN members depend.
Meanwhile, back here in the country, President Duterte said he wants the newly formed Australia, United Kingdom Meanwhile, back here in the country, President Duterte said he wants the newly formed Australia, United Kingdom, and United States trilateral partnership to respect the authority of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, when it comes to security matters of the regional bloc. During his virtual speech at the 9th ASEAN-US Summit last Tuesday, the president said he welcomes the commitment of AUKUS to help in the promotion of peace and stability in Southeast Asia. But he also said agreements should complement and not complicate the cooperation of nations and the region. Take a look.
The Philippines welcomes the U.S. assurance that ASEAN is at the center of its Indo-Pacific strategy. We acknowledge as well as the U.S. commitment to work with ASEAN, especially on maritime security and domain awareness issues. Arrangements such as the AUKUS Trilateral Security Partnership, however, add a new element to consider within the region. We take full account of the statements that AUKUS will promote peace and stability in our region and maintain support for ASEAN centrality. But one thing should be clear for all stakeholders. ASEAN's central role in the evolving regional security architecture must be strengthened, and that this or other arrangement must complement and not complicate our working methods of cooperation.
The Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitrations in 2016 ruling on the highly contested in South China Sea singles out no one, President Rodrigo Duterte said on Tuesday. During his intervention at the 24th summit between the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations and China, or ASEAN and China, Duterte said the PCA ruling gives clarity to all nations that have claims over SCS. Let's take a look.
A rules-based order is the linchpin of regional peace and stability. The peaceful resolution of disputes is a necessary and indispensable pillar of any order anchored on the majesty of the law. The 2016 arbitral award is a significant contribution to the corpus of international law, particularly the 1982 UNCLOS. It singles out no one. Rather, it justly favors and benefits the community of law-abiding nations by providing clarity to all. This clarity, which is beyond compromise, is the Philippines' humble contribution to the international legal order. We have pledged to uphold the full and effective implementation of the 22 Declaration of the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, adhere to freedom of navigational and overflight exercise, restraint, and protect the marine environment as stipulated in UNCLOS.
Apart from the Philippines and China, the other SCS claimants are ASEAN member states Brunei, Malaysia, and Vietnam, and non-ASEAN member state Taiwan.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden criticized Beijing's coercive actions across the Taiwan Strait in an address to a summit of Asia-Pacific nations also attended by China's premier. Speaking via video link to the summit, President Biden said the United States was deeply concerned by China's coercive and proactive actions across the Taiwan Strait, which separates the island from mainland China. Now, such actions threaten regional peace and stability, he said, according to a recording of his remarks obtained by AFP. Tensions have soared as Beijing steps up air incursions near Taiwan, a self-ruled democracy that China considers to be a province awaiting reunification by force if necessary. Biden was speaking at the East Asia Summit, which brings together 18 Asia-Pacific nations, although the leaders met virtually this year due to the pandemic. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang was attending along with Russian President Vladimir Putin and leaders of South Korea and Japan. U.S. President's comments come at a time of high tensions between Washington and Beijing over Taiwan, with President Biden pressing ahead with rigid policies against China that appear broadly in line with those of his predecessor, Donald Trump. President Biden last week told a televised forum in the U.S. Told a televised forum that the U.S. was ready to defend the island from any Chinese invasion, remarks that were quickly walked by the White House amid warnings from China.
President Rodrigo Duterte has renewed his call to fellow Asean leaders to hold continued talks to bring peace in the Korean Peninsula. He made this statement during the 22nd ASEAN Republic of Korea Summit on October 26, which was held via video conference. Take a look.
Securing peace in the Korean Peninsula remains a priority issue for all of us. The Philippines reiterate its goal for all parties to continue dialogue and work towards lasting peace and stability in the denuclearized Korean Peninsula.
Meanwhile, Indonesian President Joko Widodo said ASEAN and the Republic of Korea need to take advantage of the great potential for partnerships to push green and digital economy for the welfare of the global community. He said, I have a view that this partnership should focus on the future economy, namely digital and sustainable green economy. The potential of the digital economy and green economy sector is huge, he said, while joining the 22nd ASEAN Republic of Korea Summit virtually from the Bogor Presidential Palace, West Java on Tuesday. ASEAN's digital economy potential is estimated to reach $200 billion by 2025, while the green economy opportunities in the Southeast. Widodo then invited ASEAN countries and the Republic of Korea to focus on supporting a conducive environment for policymaking for the development of a green and digital economy, establishing a good ecosystem, expanding investment, and supporting technology transfer, research, and development in the two sectors. He also said the ASEAN-Korea partnership is expected to further strengthen concrete cooperation in a number of fields, namely infrastructure and green industry, clean energy, new renewable energy, energy efficiency, electric cars, economic digitization, including micro, small, and medium enterprises, and health services.
Still in Indonesia, President Joko Widodo, or Jokowi, was urged the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, and Australia to continue building trust in order to contribute to regional stability and peace. Confidence in the power of cooperation and dialogue in resolving differences so that it can exist for more than 50 years and contribute to stability, peace, and prosperity in the region, he said. The president said he realized that high dynamics can threaten regional stability. However, Indonesia does not want this region to become an arena for arms race and power projection, which can threaten stability, he remarked. Indonesia wants all parties to keep respecting the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, international law, and regional values, he said. The head of the state said Indonesia is worried about AUKUS, a trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and the planned development of Australia's nuclear power submarines under the pact, which may heighten rivalry in the region.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Makabuluhang talakayan.
Sapat na po ba yun? Papasok yung 30% sa indoor, 50% sa outdoor, para to even break even?
Ilan pong mga negosyo ang nagsara po dahil dito po sa pandemya?
Malalim na komentaryo.
Ngayon, sinasabi essential goods and services. Pero nakita naman po natin sa Dolomite Beach.
At may time clock
yung mga bata doon.
Umaapaw sa impormasyon.
Ano ba ngayon ang allotted budget per
voter. Yung hindi daw bakunado po ng mga empleyado, hindi sila pinapasweldo. Oras!
Pero hindi rin nagpapahuli sa kakulitan.
Merong nag-file for the presidency.
Hinimok daw siya ng mga alien at ang kanyang plataforma po ay palakasin ang Wi-Fi.
At ito si Ali magde-demonstrate paano mag-swimming na may face mask.
Kaya, nood na kina Ali Soto at Pati Daza sa ASPN. Ano sa palagay nyo?
Kung kayo po ay may pinagdadaanan, daanan nyo lang. Huwag niyong tambayan.
Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 8 hanggang alas 10 ng umaga.
Oras, alas 9:26 na po ng umaga at nagbabalik po ang ASPN.
Mapapanood sa Net25 at mapapakinggan sa DZEC, Radyo Aguila at Eagle FM 95.5.
Welcome back. The Department of Tourism said 14 destinations across the country have scrapped their swab test requirement for fully vaccinated guests. Take a look. Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat welcomed the latest development, noting that the DOT has been pushing for lesser restrictions and requirements, especially if the local travel destinations have high vaccination rates among their locals and tourism workers. The following destinations have agreed to waive the reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction or RT-PCR and antigen testing as of October 24, namely Cebu Province, Lapu-Lapu City, Catbalogan, Bohol, Iloilo, Negros Occidental, Clark Freeport Zone except for those from areas under ECQ, Subic Bay Freeport Zone, Tarlac except for those from areas under ECQ and MECQ, Masbate Province, Southern Leyte, Tacloban City, Maasin City, Misamis Oriental, Bohol, Iloilo City, and Negros Occidental are also requiring a vaccination certificate generated from vaccert.doh.gov.ph on top of other travel requirements. For the remaining destinations, the DOT advised travelers to check directly with the concerned local government unit for other requirements or other required entry documents. Meanwhile, Boracay Island still requires a negative RT-PCR swab test result for all allowed tourists, including those from the National Capital Region, except for tourists within Panay Island, including Guimaras Province. A woman not wearing a mask has caused a stir inside a luxury shopping store in Malaysia. Joining us live from Kuala Lumpur, here's Alfred Balmes. Alfred, what happened?
Yes, Alma, you're right. In Malaysia, a Caucasian woman was trending yesterday in a social media for not wearing a mask inside a famous shopping mall. According to the Health Ministry, Khairi Hamaludin, when in Malaysia, please mask up regardless of the rules elsewhere. He made clear the need to adhere to rules following the incident of a Caucasian woman who refused to wear a mask to enter a luxury retail outlet at famous shopping mall. In KKM Putabjaya Twitter post, when a Rome do as the Romans do, when in Malaysia, please mask up regardless of the rules elsewhere, tagging with the Health Ministry. An uproar erupted at the shopping center when a customer without a mask threw a tantrum and insisted of being allowed into a luxury brand boutique. The incident was captured in a video of many citizens and post on social media platform becomes viral. In the video, a Caucasian woman without a mask was seen complaining to the shopping center staff that the boutique worker had put his hands on her to prevent her from the entering, which was denied by the employees concerned. It immediately went viral, with the Karen being one of the top 3 trending topics on social media yesterday. Karen is the generic name used to self-entitled white women. The tweet, which registered at 11.5K likes at press time, garnered a response from netizens who were angry that the woman was not wearing a mask, as well as praising the shopping center and staff for maintaining the strict standard operating procedure. Back to you, Alma.
All right. I wish we saw the video, but yeah, mask up, always mask up. Thank you very much for that story, Alfred.
Yeah. Live reporting from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This is Albert Balmes. We live in interesting times.
I'm also curious to see that video. Meanwhile, in Thailand, Bangkok's hotels, street food carts, and tuk-tuks are preparing to welcome back tourists as Thailand gears up to reopen on November 1 to fully vaccinated visitors. Please watch this.
ด้วยครับผมคิดว่าคงจะดีขึ้นเศรษฐกิจคงจะดีขึ้นครับการท่องเที่ยวคงจะดีขึ้นแต่ก็กลัวโรคระบาดอีกรอบกลัวเหมือนกันครับ
About 5 to 10% of hotels will probably close permanently or change ownership. The hotels that are hardest hit are the ones that are independently owned, are family businesses, medium-sized properties, and the ones that are worst hit are the ones that are, have a large debt, continue to have a large debt.
We did have a reduction in our staff from the pre-pandemic levels. Encouragingly, we're seeing that there's been great growth, and we are looking forward to the country reopening, and we are looking to hire back at the moment around 40 open positions, but it is a challenge because many staff have returned or left Bangkok, so getting the right people for the right roles is a difficult part of our business at the moment.
The biggest challenge is to back to work like before. I mean, before the pandemic, we was making around 500 guests a day. Now we are quite less because we are making around 100, 150 for a day for the weekend. So during the pandemic, with the curfew and they closed the restaurant, so we have to work just with the takeaway food.
And staying in Thailand, Thailand's biggest airport, the Suvar Bumi in Bangkok, are now rehearsing their reopening procedures to welcome back the first group of tourists on November 1 as the country reopens after a devastating shutdown. Take a look.
เข้าเมืองงานศุลกากรนะครับรวมถึงสายการบินคนที่เกี่ยวข้องกับการเปิดประเทศในที่นี้เรามาร่วมกันฝึกซ้อมและทำความเข้าใจในบทบาทของตัวเองนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นอย่างที่ทางสื่อมวลชนเห็นนะครับว่าตั้งแต่ผู้โดยสารเดินทางเข้ามานั้นทุกคนจะได้รู้บทบาทเอกสารทั้งหมดของท่านจะอยู่ในเครือไม่ว่าจะเป็นอินชัวร์ไม่ว่าการจะเป็นวัคซีนสติฟิเคชันนะครับโรงแรมที่พักที่ท่านต้องอยู่ในนั้นหมดเพราะฉะนั้นคุณหมอที่ตรวจตรงนั้นก็จะรู้ว่าท่านเป็นใครจองที่พักที่ไหนวัคซีนนี้แหละก็อยู่ในนั้นเมื่อตรวจเจอว่าอุณหภูมิเกินจะมีคุณหมอที่ประจำด่านทุกจุดจะมีคุณหมอเชิญผู้โดยสารตรงนั้นคุณหมอก็จะต้องแต่งชุดตามrequirement ทุกอย่างพาผู้โดยสารไปสอบสวนโรคอีกห้องหนึ่ง
Now, airport staff playing roles of passengers walk through new entry lanes dubbed Thailand Pass and have their QR codes containing their travel, insurances, and vaccine certificates scanned before they are allowed to enter the country, while those with a temperature higher than 37 Celsius are escorted to hospitals to get tested for COVID-19. In a bid to cauterize the hemorrhaging economy, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha announced a phased plan for Thailand's reopening. From November 1, fully vaccinated visitors traveling from more than 40 low-risk countries will be allowed to enter with a negative COVID result. retesting again upon arrival. Included on the list are a slew of European countries as well as China and the US. China is Thailand's largest source of tourists, accounting for 11 million visitors in 2019. But with Beijing now imposing a minimum 2-week quarantine on returnees, few Chinese holidaymakers are likely to arrive at the kingdom's sun-soaked beaches come November. There is also no sign that India or Russia, two other major sources of visitors, will be added to the list soon. The second stage of reopening, planned for December 1st, is to end a 7-month prohibition on alcohol in bars and restaurants, a move industry figures say is vital to entice visitors looking to cut loose.
The nationwide rollout of coronavirus vaccination for children aged 12 to 17 years old will start on November 3. The government is currently on the second phase of its COVID-19 vaccination program for minors aged 12 to 17 with comorbidities in Metro Manila after it launched its pilot run in selected hospitals on October 15. Let's watch this.
Handang-handa ang lahat ng mayors ng Metro Manila about this. Yung aming mga listahan ng mga bata, matagal nang pinaghandaan ito. Ang aming mga facilities nakahanda na.
Nagbigay po ng instruction si Secretary Eduardo Año sa PNP at sa Bureau of Fire Protection na yung mga doktor at nurses ng DFP at ng PNP ay kailangan maging available sa ating mga LGUs sa inoculation nila, no? Kasi marami po tayong mga bombero at mga pulis na may medical background o kaya naman graduate ng medical allied professions. Pwede po yan tumulong sa ating vaccination program.
Phase 3 of the pediatric vaccination is set on October 29 to include selected regional hospitals outside the NCR. In a statement, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeres said Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are the only shots granted an emergency use authorization for the age group would be used for the rollout. Children with any of these comorbidities are eligible for vaccination. Medical complexity, or those with long-term dependence on technical support, genetic conditions like neurologic conditions, metabolic or endocrine diseases, cardiovascular diseases, obesity, HIV infection, tuberculosis, chronic respiratory diseases, renal diseases, hepatobiliary or biliary diseases, and those who are immunocompromised due to disease or treatment. The DOH also urged the adult population, especially those belonging to priority groups A2 or senior citizens and A3, persons with comorbidities, to get vaccinated in order to achieve the cocoon effect, which protects the children and home against COVID-19.
Meanwhile, in Cambodia, the government on October 24 completed its third phase of the 6th round of funding to assist 670,000 poor and vulnerable people. The cash assistance is to help needy people hit hard by the pandemic, with the government handing out more than 120 billion riel or $29.5 million during this round. The first phase of the 7th round began on October 23, will last until November 24, according to an announcement from the Ministry of Social Affairs, Veterans and Youth Rehabilitation on October 25. The government has provided cash assistance to poor and vulnerable people since June 25 last year, and since that time to September 24 this year, it has provided $470 million from its coffers. The Phnom Penh Post could not reach Ministry Secretary of State Sameng Boras for comments on October 26.
Still in Cambodia, Prime Minister Hun Sen says Cambodia will donate 200,000 COVID-19 vaccines to Vietnam to assist in the country in preventing the spread of COVID-19. Ministry of Health spokeswoman Van Dien, who is also head of the National COVID-19 Vaccination Committee, said on October 26 that she will hand over the vaccines to Vietnamese officials at the Bavet Mok Bai border checkpoint in Svay Rieng province on October 29 on behalf of Prime Minister Hun Sen. This is not the first time Cambodia has donated vaccines to neighboring countries. In September, the kingdom also donated 200,000 vaccines doses to Laos. Kin Phay, director of the Royal Academy of Cambodia's International Relations Institute, told the Post on October 27 that the donations demonstrated the spirit of mutual assistance in emergencies. Although Cambodia has not a country possessing abundant supplies of vaccines. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, cyber universities have been opened in Indonesia to expand higher education coverage. Director General of Higher Education, Research and Technology at the Education, Culture, Research and Technology, Minister Nizam has said. He said, we have opened some cyber universities such as Indonesia Cyber Education Institute or ICE Institute under Universitas Terbuka or UT, Universitas Cyber Asia, Muhammadiyah Cyber University, and Universitas Indonesia, Cerdas. He informed during a webinar on ICE Institute for One Indonesia televised here on Wednesday. Such efforts mirror the acceleration of digital transformation, which is important to be developed to make Indonesia not only a consumer, but also a major player in the digital era. He said we should forge our mutual cooperation spirit to transform and to support one another in attempts to build the nation, he noted. ICE Institute offers 138 online courses through its consortium comprising 14 higher education and institutions, ICE Institute head Paulina Pand informed. Meanwhile, Universitas Terbuka Rector Ojat Darojat said that ICE Institute has played an important role in opening access to recognized online courses for all students at the higher education level. In Malaysia, Malaysia may open their borders to international travelers by early December, according to the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, MOTA. Nancy Shukri Malaysia Kini reported. Fully vaccinated foreign tourists from an approved list of countries will reportedly be able to visit the island of Langkawi without having to undergo the 14-day quarantine regime. Nancy said the reopening date will be determined after observing the implementation of the international travel bubble in Langkawi that is scheduled to begin on November 15, according to the New Straits Times, or NST. On October 10, Malaysia eased domestic and international travel curbs for those fully vaccinated against the coronavirus as a fierce outbreak slows and inoculation rates rise. In a televised address on Sunday, Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob announced fully inoculated people can move freely within the country as well as fly overseas without special permission. Malaysians had been prohibited from traveling between the country's different states since January, apart from in exceptional circumstances. Overseas travel had only been allowed for those who got special permission by applying through an official system. While this requirement is being dropped, returning travelers will still need to undergo quarantine. The news continues in the CNN Focus after this short break.
Let's go! Samut-saring mga videos ang ating nakikita. Iba't ibang eksena lalo na sa social media. May nakakalokang video, may nakakatawang video, may nakakamanghang video. Sa finest na kabol video, may nakakaaliw na video, may pang-asar na video, may trending at viral video. Sa finest na kabol video. Finest na kabol video.
Welcome back. The Israeli government is in close partnership with the Philippines to boost ties on technology and innovation with the goal of helping the country's tech ecosystem grow. In a forum hosted by the Israeli Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines on Wednesday, Ambassador Ilan Plus touted Israel as a startup nation that continues to help over 6,000 businesses thrive even during the pandemic. Let's listen in.
And this doesn't come out of nothing. It comes from an ecosystem of innovation where the government plays a role, but obviously it's also the role of the private sector, of the different organizations, and also the setting in Israel. And we're working now with the Philippine government in trying to create more collaboration on innovation. Also, as an embassy here, we're looking to all kinds of opportunities, but also share the best practices and the Israeli approach and the investments of the Israeli government in helping this ecosystem to grow. So we are in touch with the DTI and the other Philippine government organizations. Also, it's important to mention that we have the Israeli trade and economic representation here in the Philippines. And one of the tasks there is to get Israeli and Philippine companies together. And again, we are focusing, and this is what Israel is doing, we're focusing on technologies and the Israeli innovation and to bring it to the Philippines.
Now, the innovation that is translated into those startups is very diversified in a variety of industries, ranging from industries in which we have domestically necessity, such as water, for example, and that's or cybersecurity, food technologies, or computer vision in different elements, robotics, for example, fintech, financial technologies. And the current situation of the Israeli tech innovation landscape is actually a very diversified one, a very varied one, that touches upon almost any vertical and any industry you can think of. Last year, there were over $10 billion of investments in venture capital in Israeli startups. In 2021, the 3 first quarters, $17 billion. And 2020 was another record year, so 2021 is now the new record year. And that has been the situation for the past decade. The Israeli tech ecosystem keeps growing in all the different elements.
The domestic economy is expected to remain in expansion mode, even with the movement restrictions in the third quarter of 2021. In his speech during the Manila Times virtual 123rd anniversary on Wednesday, Social Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua said around 77% of the country's economy remains in heightened quarantine, but people appear to have internalized the pandemic already. Let's watch this.
It is becoming very clear that we should be moving from a pandemic mentality to an endemic mentality. In the second week of November, we will be seeing the third quarter GDP growth. And this important progress is not only due to base effects, it is also due to the effort, all our effort, to manage the pandemic better. There are, of course, some base effects, but we are in general seeing our exports recovering quite strongly. In terms of our merchandise import growth, this is a strong indicator of our capacity to consume and also to build our infrastructure program. They are also very strong double-digit growth in 2021.
Economic Manager's growth assumption for this year is an expansion of between 4 to 5%. The Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, is set to report the third quarter GDP on November 9. Chua, also the National Economic Development Authority, or NEDA, Director General said sustainability of domestic growth depends on people's actions or by adhering to the health protocols.
And finally, in our news, the Philippine Sports Commission supports the ASEAN Sports Ministers' initiative to add more Asian and Olympic events in the future editions of the Southeast Asian Games, which was part of the agenda of the 6th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Sports, or AMMS 6, on Thursday. Take a look. It's a clear pathway. I see this is an efficient way to take as we prepare our national athletes for the Olympics while we are preparing them for the SEAG, or the Asian Games, according to PSC Chairman William Butch Jr., representing the country in the said virtual gathering of ASEAN sports ministers and senior officials. Ramirez, who chaired the AMMS-5 in 2019, will be joining the virtual meetings along with sports ministers, senior officials, and other delegates from Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore, the current host nation for the AMMS-6. One of the anticipated projects to be taken up is the engagement of ASEAN member states and relevant stakeholders in initiatives on sports, law, women in sports, capacity building, and anti-doping.
And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. I'm December Paras of EBC Indonesia Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you very much, December. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.